It was our last day of school before summer vacation, and David invited us to hang out and stay the weekend at his place before we all headed out of town for the summer. My parents were going out to a party that night, and they couldn't leave my little sister Emily alone, so they asked me to take Emily with me to David's place. Jennifer and I, along with my little sister, headed over together that Friday night. He was surprised to see Emily, but welcomed her and gave her toys to play with in the lounge. Meanwhile, the three of us sat together in the other room gossiping and chatting about the school year. While Emily was in the lounge, she saw something hidden behind the wall, and she went to see what it was. Turns out that it was a box that was sealed up tightly with tape so that no one would open it. But unfortunately, Emily was able to get it open and started exploring what was inside the box. Inside the box was an old and broken board. She took it out and brought all the broken pieces together. It turned out to be a Ouija board. She found the planchette in the box as well and placed it on the board, but she didn't know how it worked. While she was playing with it and not knowing what she was doing, books started flying off the shelf and smashing into the opposite wall. We all were startled by the loud sounds and went to see what Emily was up to. We saw books all over the floor and other things in disarray. Then Jennifer got quiet and pointed at the corner of the lounge. It was Emily, standing there with a box in her hand, and her head was down with her hair all out of sorts. I immediately grabbed her and asked what she was up to. David shouted, "Is that an Ouija board in her hands?" He told us that his older brother used to play with it until he died in a tragic car accident. Since then, it was hidden and no one touched it. My dad had forbidden us to play with it. I used to catch my brother playing with it though, and I know how it works, but I prefer not to do anything with it. It gives me spooky vibes whenever I see it. Emily replied in a cold tone, "You can teach me how to play with it the right way." David didn't answer her and instead asked how the books fell off the shelf, to which Emily replied, "I was trying to grab one and I fell," keeping her tone cold. Emily insisted on playing with the board. Jennifer also wanted to try it, so we turned off the lights, closed the window shades, and lit a candle. David then drew a circle, told us all to sit in it, and placed the board in the middle of us. It all looked like a creepy ritual setup. I asked him, "Isn't this a little creepy?" He replied abruptly, "You asked for it." He then told us to put our hands on the eye-shaped thing called a planchette that slid over the Ouija board. David said, "Now I'll say something my brother used to say while doing this, and no one can remove their fingers from the planchette till I finish." After that, he started saying, "Soul of the dead wandering in this night. If you are present here, then show yourself." While David was repeating the spell, Emily started whispering with her eyes closed. Suddenly, Emily stopped whispering and snapped her neck back, looking at the ceiling. She gasped like an old lady and started coughing. David immediately ended the spell, and we noticed the planchette didn't move. I was staring at my little sister, shocked at her behavior and how sickly she started to look. David told us to let go of the planchette, and when we did, it started moving around the board on its own. David read the letters, and it was the name of his dead brother. The board then stated, "Destroy it!" Then the planchette abruptly stopped, and things started being thrown around the room. We had no idea what was going on, but we were all terrified. David started to cry and kept on saying, "My brother must not have just died in an accident. I think this board killed him, and now it's going to kill us too." I asked David, "Was your brother acting strange before he died?" He said his brother was very quiet in his last days, and he was acting very odd, not like himself. I looked at Emily and realized she was showing the same behavior since we arrived. I was so worried, and it was late. When all the commotion stopped, and Emily and the rest of us had calmed down, we decided to go to sleep. We'd contact our parents tomorrow. Everyone was still afraid of what had just happened, but somehow we were able to fall asleep. I woke up in the middle of the night because of some whispers. It was Emily, lying next to me, murmuring continuously. I shook her awake and held her until she fell asleep again. I decided not to wake anyone else up and tell them about Emily's behavior, as that might scare them even more. The next day, all of us woke up pretty uneasy. Finally, Jennifer broke the silence and said, "I know we're all feeling shaken up from last night in the Ouija board. Why don't we try it again and undo what we did last night?" At first, we all weren't sure if we should do that or not, but David wanted to try again to talk to his brother. He said, "We have to finish what we started." We set everything up with the lights off and the Ouija board in the middle of us. We sat around the board and closed our eyes. Meanwhile, David started whispering his so-called spells again. This time, the feeling was intense. We could feel the presence in the room. Silence took over the room, and I could see fear in the eyes of everyone looking at each other. All of a sudden, the candlelight started to flicker, the air around us went cold, and the planchette began to move aggressively. This time, we asked the name of the spirit, and it spelled D-E-V-I-L, and we were stunned. David asked, "Do you know who killed my brother?" But the planchette didn't move. And then out of nowhere, it flew from our grip and slammed on the board. We watched as it pointed towards the letter I. David started shouting, "The devil did it! He killed my brother! Don't break the circle! We have to end it before he kills us too!" Furniture started shaking and falling over. I started crying, and Jennifer was so petrified she was physically shaking. Meanwhile, Emily was still acting strange. The carpet in the room was torn apart, and furniture was upside down. Books and accessories were smashing on the walls. We were all screaming. Suddenly, everything stopped, and silence took over. I looked beside me and saw that Emily wasn't next to me anymore. The circle around us broke, and that gave the devil spirit access to us. The door was flung open, and a woman in a black gown with red eyes stared right at us, standing there. It was the devil. She entered the room and meandered around us quietly as we were shaking with total and utter fear. I still couldn't see Emily in the dark until I saw someone levitating just at the corner of the room. It was Emily with her hands and feet hanging down and twisting. She was clamoring in pain, but we couldn't help her. The creepy devil started laughing. In her heavy voice, she kept on saying, "You started this, and now I will end it." After the devil said that, Emily started to choke. And now she was levitating in the middle of the room as if she was hanging on a ceiling fan. She kept on choking, and I was able to pull her down, but I couldn't help her from choking. David gathered all his courage, stood up with the board in his hand, and smashed it against the wall to destroy it. The devil screamed and vanished into thin air. Emily collapsed and was unconscious for quite some time. We burned the board after that, and we all decided to leave. But then, just as we were preparing to leave, we heard a knock at the front door. It was an old man with his middle-aged daughter. The old man said they used to live there a long time ago, and they stopped by to see the place after so many years. The house was almost upside down because of the tragic incident, but David couldn't think that much, so he allowed them in. They looked around the house, and then stopped outside the room where we saw the devil. "That's where she hanged herself," the man's daughter said while pointing towards David's room. "She told us that her aunt hung herself in this room, and she would see the ghost of her aunt wandering about in the house during the night in her tall black dress when she was just a kid." The old man interrupted and said, "It's time to leave, dear." Her daughter pulled David close to her and whispered in his ear, "You started it again, and she'll end it now." And they left. David and his parents moved away shortly after that incident.